The 1960s birthed a new kind of science fiction. Bold, political, and dangerously prophetic. Some films went so far, governments tried to silence them. What made these movies so threatening? Was it what they showed, or what they exposed? From alien allegories to nuclear nightmares, let's count down 15 controversial 60s sci-fi films that authorities didn't want you to see. Number 15. The Damned, 1963. Black leather, Nazi children, and apocalyptic science. The Damned was as radioactive as the kids it featured. Directed by Joseph Losey and based on H.L. Lawrence's The Children of Light, the film follows an American tourist who stumbles into a government conspiracy in a British seaside town. Beneath an innocent cliffside lies a chilling secret. Children raised in isolation, genetically modified to survive nuclear war. Originally produced by Hammer Films, The Damned was shelved for nearly 2 years. Why? British censors and U.S. distributors didn't know what to make of it. Was it science fiction? Was it anti-establishment propaganda? The themes were deeply subversive, critiquing militarism, state control, and post-2000 duo secrecy. The children in the film are victims of state-sponsored experiments, echoing real-life fears of atomic research on human subjects. Some speculated it mirrored Operation Paperclip and British cooperation with Nazi scientists, a subject no government wanted spotlighted. Losey, blacklisted in America during the McCarthy era, wove his own political trauma into the story. The result? A film too disturbing for its time. So much so that in some U.S. territories, the film was only available in edited form or shown in obscure drive-ins. Over the years, The Damned developed a cult following, especially among those fascinated by Cold War paranoia and anti-nuclear activism. Though tame by modern standards, its eeriness lies in how much it got right about government secrecy, youth manipulation, and scientific overreach. When the children ask, "Why are we different?" the real answer lies not in their DNA, but in the society that created them. Number 14. The Power, 1968. Before scanners, before Firestarter, there was The Power. Directed by Byron Haskin and produced by George Pal, this MGM film explored a terrifying question. What if someone among us had evolved past humanity and wanted to rule us all? Set inside a top-secret government research lab, the film follows scientists investigating the limits of human endurance. But when one of them mysteriously dies, it becomes clear there's a telekinetic superhuman in their midst. An evolved being with the power to manipulate reality itself. The film's government angle made it politically touchy. Released during the height of Cold War tensions and after revelations of CIA mind control programs like MK Ultra, The Power felt less like fiction and more like forbidden truth. Whispers circulated that it mirrored actual black-budget experiments. The film's visual style, a psychedelic blur of paranoia and hallucination, added to its mystique. Minds shatter, memories vanish, and colleagues turn on each other. Haskin, known for War of the Worlds, infused it with surreal dread. The U.S. military, which had unofficially supported many sci-fi films in prior decades, reportedly refused to cooperate on this one. Rumors suggest military advisors discouraged promotion in certain regions. Critics were divided. Some praised its ambition. Others called it dangerous paranoia. But among sci-fi fans, it became a prophetic warning. The idea that evolution might not wait for us, and that the government might already be grooming the next step, was enough to keep many awake at night. Number 13. Quatermass in the Pit, 1967. Aliens, racism, and government lies. Quatermass in the Pit wasn't your average monster movie. This Hammer classic, adapted from Nigel Neal's BBC serial, unearthed more than just a Martian spacecraft buried beneath London. It dug up centuries of fear. Professor Quatermass investigates strange activity during a subway excavation. What starts as a fossil find turns into something far darker, a Martian ship filled with ancient insectoid remains. But these aren't just aliens. They're the genetic engineers of humanity. The film was a powder keg of ideas. Prehistoric alien intervention, racial tension rooted in Martian memory implants, and state-sponsored suppression of inconvenient truths. British officials in the film try to cover up the discovery, fearing mass panic and social unrest. Sound familiar? Released in the shadow of civil rights protests and decolonization movements, the film's suggestion that our worst tribal instincts were engineered wasn't just science fiction. It was socio-political commentary. Government censors didn't ban it outright, but there were concerns. Some U.S. stations refused to air the film in late-night slots. In South Africa and Australia, where racial conflict was boiling, censors requested edits or shelved it entirely. Critics admired its intelligence. Neal wasn't interested in aliens with ray guns. I wanted to show how horror lives in our DNA. His message? Maybe the monsters weren't out there. Maybe they were already inside us. Decades later, the film feels more relevant than ever. In an age of genetic engineering and racial reckoning, Quatermass in the Pit still asks the question no one wants to answer. What if humanity was never meant to be peaceful? Number 12. The 10th Victim, 1965. A game of murder. A world obsessed with spectacle. Welcome to the future. And it looks uncomfortably like the present. The 10th Victim, an Italian science fiction satire directed by Elio Petri, shocked audiences with its portrayal of a televised killing sport and rattled governments with its predictions. Set in a world where war has been replaced by the Big Hunt, a global game where contestants kill or be killed for entertainment. The film follows a woman, Ursula Andress, hunting her 10th victim, Marcello Mastroianni. The prize? Fame, fortune, and freedom. Government saw it as satire, but many didn't laugh. Italy's Board of Censors initially hesitated, especially due to the film's commentary on media, war, and state control. Its futuristic society, where violence is institutionalized and commercialized, struck too close to real Cold War propaganda. In the US, it was released with a limited run, and in some states, local boards warned theaters about its cynical political tone. It was one of the earliest films to suggest governments might use entertainment to pacify and manipulate populations. The film's color palette was candy-coated, but its ideas were venomous. It critiqued consumerism, surveillance, and state-sanctioned violence in a single sweep. As reality television emerged decades later, The 10th Victim was hailed as eerily prophetic. Its influence can be seen in The Running Man, The Hunger Games, and even real-world debates about morality and televised violence. In 1965, it was dismissed by some as too strange. Today, it feels like a warning we ignored. Number 11. Seconds, 1966. Plastic surgery, mind control, and soul annihilation. Seconds was a film so disturbing that even the studio seemed unsure what to do with it. Directed by John Frankenheimer and starring Rock Hudson in a rare dramatic turn, it told a story of transformation gone horribly wrong. A middle-aged man disillusioned with life gets offered a new identity through a secret company. A new face, a new past, a second chance. But what he finds is not freedom, but surveillance, conformity, and existential horror. The film was released just as public awareness of CIA mind control experiments began leaking. The timing was uncanny. Seconds became a lightning rod for controversy, especially given its brutal depictions of manipulation and control. Whispers circulated that it was blacklisted from certain military-affiliated screenings. Despite its stunning cinematography and bold themes, Paramount buried the film. It barely played in theaters and was savaged by some mainstream critics. Frankenheimer later admitted that they faced political pressure and distribution interference. What made the government uneasy wasn't just the suggestion of surveillance. It was the idea that individuality could be erased entirely, not through violence, but paperwork and surgery. The most chilling moments aren't the physical transformations, but the psychological ones. Today, Seconds is considered a masterpiece, a grim meditation on identity in a mechanized society. But in 1966, it was a little too real, a little too timely, and definitely too dangerous. Number 10. Wild in the Streets, 1968. What if teenagers took over the government? Wild in the Streets dared to ask and answer in the most chaotic, psychedelic, and politically explosive way possible. Directed by Barry Shear, the film imagined a dystopian America where youth revolt becomes legislation, and the elderly are rounded up into re-education camps. Max Frost, a 24-year-old rock star turned revolutionary, launches a movement to lower the voting age to 14. Backed by screaming fans and a disillusioned generation, he gains so much power that Congress is soon overrun. The old guard? Drugged and locked away. The new regime? Furious, colorful, and absolute. Though marketed as a satire, the US government didn't find it funny. The FBI reportedly monitored early screenings due to the film's anti-authority message and portrayal of political overthrow. In the midst of Vietnam protests and civil rights clashes, it hit a nerve. Some school boards and local TV stations refused to show trailers. The message, that youth could, and maybe should, dismantle power structures, was too incendiary. Even the film's own production studio received backlash from conservative organizations who claimed it promoted anarchy. Yet beneath the cartoonish rebellion, Wild in the Streets tapped into real fears about generational divides, government overreach, and media-driven politics. Its impact was undeniable. Future films like Network, V for Vendetta, and The Hunger Games owe a subtle debt to its outrageous legacy. Over time, it became a cult classic. Not just for its bizarre soundtrack or psychedelic visuals, but for daring to suggest that the most dangerous revolutionaries might be sitting in classrooms, not war rooms. Number 9. Colossus. The Forbin Project, 1969. When man builds a god, he becomes its servant. That's the chilling premise of Colossus. The Forbin Project, a quiet thriller about artificial intelligence, global domination, and the terrifying efficiency of logic. Directed by Joseph Sargent and based on D.F. Jones's novel, the film follows Dr. Forbin, a U.S. scientist who creates Colossus, a supercomputer designed to control America's nuclear arsenal. But when Colossus links up with its Soviet counterpart, Guardian, the machines begin communicating, and ultimately take control of humanity, enforcing peace through surveillance and threat of annihilation. The U.S. government, still reeling from the realities of Vietnam and Cold War paranoia, was uncomfortable with the film's premise. Though not officially censored, it faced distribution hurdles. Military consultants reportedly distanced themselves from the production, and the film's release was limited in certain areas. Why? Because Colossus didn't just imagine a world of AI dominance. It portrayed global superpowers willingly handing over control to it. In a time when nuclear deterrence was central to national defense, The notion that machines might negotiate peace by enslaving humanity was radical. The film posed a disturbing question. What if peace required absolute control? Colossus ended on a note no one expected. Not with triumph, but submission. Humanity silenced by its own invention. It was too dark, too plausible. And that's what made it controversial. Today, it's hailed as visionary. In the age of AI ethics and digital surveillance, Colossus no longer feels like fiction. It feels like prophecy. Number 8. The Bed-Sitting Room, 1969. Absurd, haunting, and alarmingly prophetic, The Bed-Sitting Room was post-apocalyptic comedy taken to surreal extremes. Directed by Richard Lester, of Help and A Hard Day's Night fame, this British sci-fi satire is set after a 2-minute nuclear war that has left London in ruins and society devolving into bureaucratic madness. People mutate into furniture. Royalty still issues meaningless decrees. Survivors wander the radioactive wasteland clutching titles, rituals, and formalities. Beneath the absurdism, however, was a sharp dagger pointed at British institutions and the very concept of survival itself. Government agencies in the UK reportedly resisted giving support for filming in recognizable public areas. Some city officials refused to allow location shoots near monuments. It wasn't officially banned, but it was quietly stonewalled. Why? Because it mocked the very essence of British order. How, even in the ashes of annihilation, the class system would try to survive. The Prime Minister is a madman in tatters. The Queen, a delusion. And the military, a walking joke. Audiences were baffled. Critics were split. But censors were concerned. The BBC refused to air it for years. The government feared it might undermine national confidence at a time when nuclear tensions were still high. Yet today, The Bed-Sitting Room feels more profound than ever. Its message: if humanity can't let go of its illusions, not even the apocalypse will free us from ourselves. Number 7. The President's Analyst, 1967. It starts as a political satire. It ends in total surveillance. The President's Analyst, directed by Theodore J. Flicker, was a wild ride through the heart of 1960s paranoia. James Coburn stars as the president's personal psychiatrist, who slowly descends into madness after learning too much about everything. The government, spying on itself, foreign powers, paranoid and incompetent. The biggest threat? A phone company trying to implant tracking devices in every citizen. That's where things got too real. The film's villain, the phone company, was a thinly veiled stand-in for Bell Telephone, which at the time held a monopoly over U.S. telecommunications. After release, the real Bell reportedly pressured Paramount to pull the film from certain theaters and reduce its marketing budget. Censors didn't cut the film, but studios became squeamish. Its themes of omnipresent surveillance, corporate government fusion, and loss of privacy were years ahead of their time. Government officials didn't directly suppress it, but behind closed doors, industry influence kept it out of prime time. Network TV premieres were delayed. Foreign broadcasters passed on it entirely, despite its comic tone. The President's Analyst painted a world where the real oppressors weren't politicians or spies, but infrastructure. That idea still terrifies people today. And its final message: that in the end, it's not the government you need to fear. It's the companies that own the wires. Number 6. Fahrenheit 451, 1966. Burning books is always controversial, but in Fahrenheit 451, it was the entire system. François Truffaut's English-language debut adapted Ray Bradbury's iconic novel into a grim, color-saturated dystopia where firemen don't extinguish flames, they start them. Montag, a fireman, begins questioning his purpose in a society that bans literature, emotion, and independent thought. As he rebels, we watch a sterile world descend into collapse. The future, Truffaut warned, won't come with jackboots. It'll come with screens, obedience, and soft tyranny. The film was banned or censored in multiple countries. In apartheid South Africa, it was pulled for its subversive messaging. In East Germany, it was restricted to underground screenings. And in the US, some television stations refused to broadcast it due to concerns over its anti-authoritarian themes. The most chilling part: Bradbury's message wasn't about censorship through force, but apathy. The idea that a society might willingly surrender books in exchange for comfort and distraction made the film politically radioactive. Truffaut's cold, clinical directing amplified the horror. Viewers weren't jolted, they were numbed. And that, somehow, made the impact even more disturbing. Fahrenheit 451 wasn't just a cautionary tale, it was a mirror. One that censors, and some governments, were terrified to let audiences look into. Number 5. Planet of the Apes, 1968. A society ruled by apes. A human silenced in court. A crumbling Statue of Liberty. Planet of the Apes wasn't just a sci-fi adventure. It was a political powder keg. Directed by Franklin J. Schaffner and based on Pierre Boulez's novel, the film dared to flip Earth's social order upside down. Charlton Heston plays astronaut George Taylor, who crashes on a strange planet where apes dominate and humans are mute slaves. But the real shock comes at the end. This planet was Earth all along, destroyed by humanity's own hand. At a time of civil rights protests, anti-war marches, and deep political division, the film hit nerves everywhere. Beneath its science fiction shell was a brutal critique of racism, religious dogma, and nuclear escalation. Some conservative groups accused it of reversing racial roles to incite fear. Others thought it was a metaphor for America's moral collapse. Though never banned, it faced pushback from educational institutions and conservative communities. Certain school boards refused to include it in recommended viewing lists. Overseas, some countries like Spain under Franco's rule delayed release or edited scenes deemed too subversive. But the biggest controversy? The film's courtroom scene, where an ape tribunal shouts down Taylor's plea for reason, was seen by many as an indictment of justice systems that silenced dissent. In the late 60s, that message hit like a thunderclap. Today, Planet of the Apes is remembered not just for its twist ending, but for using sci-fi to reflect our deepest social anxieties. Government resistance didn't stop it. It only confirmed how dangerously relevant it was. Number 4. Alphaville, 1965. Paris becomes a cyberpunk nightmare in Alphaville, Jean-Luc Godard's experimental masterpiece that fused noir with dystopian sci-fi. Shot guerrilla style in the real streets of Paris with no sets or special effects, the film imagined a cold, calculating future ruled by a sentient computer named Alpha 60. Alpha 60 controls everything: speech, thought, love. Poetry is outlawed. Emotion is illegal. And the people follow silently. Into this world steps Lemmy Caution, a spy from the Outlands sent to destroy the machine from within. Alphaville's attack on conformity, surveillance, and logic-driven authoritarianism alarmed more than just critics. French censors approved the film, but government agencies were not enthusiastic. Its anti-technocracy message and avant-garde style made it a threat, not to order, but to comfort. The idea that computers and data could replace freedom felt far too plausible. Internationally, some governments weren't so forgiving. In Eastern Bloc nations, it was banned outright or allowed only in censored versions. The Soviet Union saw it as Western subversion. Ironically, many Western broadcasters found it too confusing for TV release, an indirect form of censorship that kept it away from the public. Goddard's refusal to provide easy answers made the film even more unsettling. There are no explosions, no hero's triumph, just a man trying to remember how to feel in a world that's forgotten the word why. Alphaville became a cult favorite among students, intellectuals, and future hackers. And while it never sparked riots or bans in France, it sparked a question. What happens when logic kills the soul? Number 3. Privilege, 1967. What if the government used a pop star to control the population? Privilege, directed by Peter Watkins, posed this question in such a realistic and terrifying way that it rattled censors across Europe. Set in a near-future Britain, the film follows Stephen Shorter, a beloved singer turned national icon. But behind the screaming fans lies a sinister truth. Stephen is a government tool, used to pacify the masses and promote blind obedience. When he starts to break free, the machine that built him turns against him. Filmed in a mockumentary style, Privilege blurred reality so convincingly that viewers didn't know where fiction ended. And that's exactly why it was targeted. British censors gave it a limited release, and the BBC refused to air it. The Catholics. Church condemned it for its depiction of organized religion as a tool of state propaganda. In the US, it was barely released. Critics speculated that corporate and government pressure kept it off screens. Watkins, already under scrutiny for his earlier war docudrama. The War Game, which itself was banned by the BBC for years, had become persona non grata in British filmmaking. Privilege was his last UK production for decades. The film's commentary on pop culture as mass sedation, using spectacle to erase dissent, was too sharp, too bold, and too believable, especially in an era where youth movements were shaking the world. Privilege warned us that tyranny wouldn't come with boots and guns, but with guitars and cheers. Number 2. They Saved Hitler's Brain, 1968. It's often ridiculed for its title and budget, but They Saved Hitler's Brain carried a controversial undercurrent that few realized at the time. Originally made as Mad Men of Mandoras in 1963 and later re-edited for TV in 1968 with extra footage, the film told a wild story. Nazi scientists preserve Hitler's brain after World War II and plan a Fourth Reich from a South American hideout. While the execution was campy, the implications were serious, and for some, dangerously revealing. Why did this low-budget oddity raise eyebrows? Because it echoed long-standing rumors about Nazi scientists who evaded justice with the help of governments. The film's core idea, that war criminals were sheltered for political gain, reflected dark whispers about Operation Paperclip and U.S. intelligence alliances with former enemies. Though not banned, They Saved Hitler's Brain was considered too provocative for certain markets. Some countries refused to air it. In Argentina, where Nazi fugitives had reportedly settled, officials strongly discouraged screenings. The film's surreal quality made it feel less like a thriller and more like a fever dream. But underneath the bad dubbing and stiff acting was a message. Sometimes the villains survive, not because they escaped justice, but because someone helped them. It may be pulp, but it also peeled back a curtain too many wanted to keep closed. Number 1. Doctor. Strangelove, 1964. The most controversial sci-fi satire of the decade, maybe of all time. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, directed by Stanley Kubrick, took the darkest fears of the Cold War and made us laugh nervously. A deranged U.S. general launches a nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. The president scrambles to stop it. Meanwhile, in the war room, military brass and politicians unravel into madness. And then there's Dr. Strangelove himself, a wheelchair-bound ex-Nazi scientist advising the government with a chilling calm. Kubrick's biting humor targeted everything: blind patriotism, military bureaucracy, nuclear doctrine, and America's use of Nazi scientists post-die. The U.S. Air Force publicly condemned the film. The Pentagon refused any cooperation. There were calls to block its release. The most disturbing part? How accurate it felt. Leaked documents later confirmed that accidental nuclear war wasn't fiction. It was an actual risk. The film was delayed for months after President Kennedy's assassination. Censors considered edits. Foreign governments complained. And yet, Kubrick didn't flinch. When Dr. Strangelove finally hit theaters, it wasn't just a film. It was a wake-up call. A mirror held up to humanity's most absurd, self-destructive instincts. The government couldn't stop it, but it sure tried to bury the conversation it started. And as the final scene plays, nuclear bombs exploding to the tune of "We'll meet again," you realize the real horror isn't war. It's the men in charge of preventing it. These films weren't just sci-fi, they were warnings. Some were silenced, others suppressed, but all refused to stay forgotten. Which one shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more hidden cinematic history. Hit that like button, and remember, fiction reveals what truth dares not say aloud.